Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In this video we're taking a look at this beautiful Toshiba 4000 CDS laptop. Oh wait, I think I got this a bit out of sequence, so let's start again. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In this video we're taking a look at my Toshiba 4000 CDS laptop. That's right, it ain't the prettiest one. It's a bit cosmetically challenged. It does start, but the hard drive has decided to take the day off. It has a horrible dual scan DSTN display, DSTN standing for poor quality, lots of noise, smearing, low contrast, and slow response. I mean, this thing is so bad that certain components inside even decided to detach themselves in the hopes of abandoning ship. But yeah, we're going to take a look at it anyways because I think this is a very good laptop to learn how to disassemble it, how to work on it. If it fails and you screw up, nothing major is lost. So I thought it would be a good opportunity just to record some video of me disassembling the thing. I'm by no means an expert on disassembling laptops, as you might already have guessed or seen on the channel. But I thought it would be fun to take you on this journey where we will look at this Pentium 2 MMX-based 4000 CDS Toshiba Satelitte laptop and see what she does. Now, when we started, we do get the Toshiba splash screen, so in touch with tomorrow Toshiba, which was their slogan back in the day. But the computer fails to boot up. So what's basically happening is that the hard drive is having a hard time initializing. The computer doesn't recognize the hard drive, and our only option is to boot from a floppy disk. You might also notice the two horizontal lines on the LCD display here, which also indicates trouble, but we'll see what we can do about that. But yeah, first up, the hard drive. And as you can probably hear, or at least I hope you can hear, that it's trying to spin up, but it's not able to do so, and it keeps shutting down, retrying, and as a result, we cannot boot from the hard drive right now. Because the internal battery was dead, we were immediately dropped in the system setup, but that is very basic. We cannot do any type of hard drive auto detection. It's all basically automatic. We can change some battery modes, some peripherals, but that's basically it. It's a very, limited setup program that we have here. But let's take another listen to the hard drive. So yeah, first thing I did is flip the laptop upside down and try to remove the battery. It was a bit stuck, but eventually I got it out. And immediately I could see that there was some corrosion here. I don't know if this was coming from the laptop battery itself or if there was something behind that battery compartment there that started leaking internally. We'll need to see about that. The hard drive is hidden beneath this little panel here and can be removed very easily via its bracket. It's a Toshiba branded hard drive, 4.3 gigabytes in size. Now I know from experience that as soon as you try to open up a hard drive like this, your chances of actually repairing it are super slim, so I'm not going to be doing that. Now, in my experience, also sometimes just by taking the hard drive out and putting it back in kind of loosens it up, or I don't know what it does, but you can typically get these things up and running. And this is exactly what happened here, because when I put the hard drive back in and I started the computer, it immediately started booting into Windows 95. And here you can see the horrible screen again, the DSTN panel with the little contrast switch here on the side. It's a pretty horrible screen. I mean, these Toshibas typically come with these dual scan setups, which are typically the CDS lines, but they also have this active TFT matrix screens, which are typically the CDT models. They were a little bit more expensive, but definitely worth it because, I mean, this screen is super horrible. It has lots of ghosting. You just can't use it to to see anything moving on it. You cannot play video games on it. You cannot not watch movies on it. If the mouse thingy on the keyboard would work, I would happily show you the trailing Windows mouse cursor here, but it doesn't want to work for some reason. But if you look at the clock here, you can see by as the seconds are ticking by that there is a lot of ghosting on this screen, which is a bit of a shame, obviously. But again, it's a laptop to learn something. If it breaks, there's no real harm done. So it's best to try this out on some more mediocre hardware. I got this laptop as a freebie from somebody, so no harm will be done if this laptop ends up losing its life. Now the hard drive is making some funny noises here, but let's take a look at the screen. And yeah, I mean, you can even see the ghosting as you are navigating the start menu here. And you know, despite the fact that there is this contrast knob here on the right, it's very difficult to get the screen settings just right, and the two horizontal lines as well become pretty annoying after a while. Okay, so yeah, 6 minutes into the video, it's about time to start the disassembly process. So we start by unscrewing all of the visible screws that we see here on the back. There are also a couple of screws hidden away beneath the hard drive and also the battery, so definitely remove those as well. And that's basically your first start. On the back there are also 2 screws that we need to remove. And then the first real challenge begins. How do we get this top part off from the bottom? The top part being the keyboard, the screen, and this whole plastic assembly. Well, I noticed that just above the keyboard here, there was this separate piece of plastic that could be removed. So I'm guessing this should probably need to go if we want to do something with the keyboard, because sometimes on these laptops, the keyboard is also holding stuff in place or hiding certain screws. So I took out this little piece of plastic here, and then I could easily remove the keyboard, which was attached by this single flat cable here onto the motherboard. So it was just a matter of gently removing that cable from its connector. I would advise you not to use a screwdriver like I did here, but just use, you know, your fingernails to open up these tabs here. And then we can go ahead again, removing some additional screws that were hidden away. Now there's good chance by this point that you've started to become impatient and you just want to use brute force to tear this top cover off and get your hands in there, but I wouldn't recommend it. Now a better way to go about it is to use this plastic spudger tools like the ones that you find in iFixit stuff, but you can get these separate as well. You just get them, you know, into this plastic crack here, and then you can get you can pry it open. If you try to use a screwdriver, you're gonna see some damage here like I did here for demonstration purposes, but it's a lot better to use this plastic spudger instead, which will not you know, break your plastic at all. As you're finally ready to get the top part off, you will come to the realization that it's held together by a couple of cables still to the motherboard, which are, you know, pretty annoying to get to. You don't have a lot of clearance here, but if you just tilt the top part a little bit, you can get your hands in there and start removing the connectors. There are 2 speaker connectors and 2 LCD panel connectors that you need to remove, and then the top part can go completely. And what we're seeing inside is definitely not good, because we see a lot of corrosion here coming from that battery. All the way up to the 2 little connectors here, you can see the corrosion that occurred from the leaking of that battery. And it was even so bad that the connector was completely stuck and I just couldn't get it out of its connector here. So, and as soon as I started pulling a little bit on these cables, they just came right off. So yeah, corrosion also made its way to the PCB of the motherboard itself. Luckily not too much damage here. But yeah, these you know, Varda batteries here, which are used in laptops to store CMOS settings, configuration, daytime, but also allow the laptop to, you know, go into sleep mode and resume, are a real pain to work with, much like in desktop PCs. I mean, they start leaking and wreaking havoc all over the place, as was the case with this Toshiba laptop as well. And it's not just, the area where the battery was located here, but, via the wires, it's made its way to these little connectors here, which then provided a path to the actual motherboard. But also on this daughter board here beneath it, you started to see corrosion building up. And yeah, it's just something that you want to get rid of as soon as possible. Yeah, so really nasty stuff here, as you can see. Now, to continue with the disassembly, there are a couple of other connectors here on the motherboard. So we have a connector here that leads up to the PCB for some LEDs. We have a cable which goes to the two buttons of the mouse, a connector for the CD-ROM drive and the disk drive, and also one for the fan on the back. So we'll start by removing all of these connectors from the motherboard, as the goal is still to get the motherboard out of this plastic case here. So it's just a matter of unplugging all of the connectors. They're all different, so you just need to figure out what works best in order to get them out without breaking them. And then if you want, you can remove all of these other PCBs, like the LEDs over there, the two mouse buttons, the disk drive, and the CD-ROM drive. Now, the CD-ROM drive, for example, doesn't prevent you from getting the motherboard out, but as we are busy with it now, it's always a good idea to just remove as much as possible. And as you can see here, that there was definitely some other, corrosion happening here. Perhaps there was some, water damage or something. I don't know. So next up, it's a matter of finding all of the screws here on the motherboard that we can unscrew. And there are lots of different screws here in this laptop, because the first 4 screws that I removed were already 4 different types. They're all Phillips screws, luckily, so you don't need to look for, different types of screwdrivers. But you're always going to forget that one screw that was preventing you from getting the motherboard out. But once all of the screws have been removed, it should be fairly easy to get the motherboard out of the plastic housing, as there is nothing, impeding you from getting it out of the case. And finally, now we can reveal what was making that noise inside the laptop. And I have actually no idea what this little plastic thingy is, but it was definitely that was making all of the noise inside of the laptop. Now here we have a good view of the damage created by this leaking battery. So we're going to try and clean that up. I'm actually going to do that as in part 2 of this video. And so here we have the motherboard. If we look at the connectors, we have the two internal battery connectors. We have the connector for the LEDs. We have a connector for the mouse buttons. We have a connector for the optical drive. We have the keyboard connector. We have the LCD display connector and the optical drive adapter. We also have 2 connectors here for the speakers, left and right. And here the DC fan on the back. Now, if we turn the board around, on the left here, you see the PCMCIA section, which can hold up to 2 PCMCIA cards. It's a modular thing that kind of plugs into the motherboard. And this is probably the Toshiba PCMCIA controller chip. We have an Intel chipset here, the 82371EB. The power delivery circuit here. So yeah, we get DC power input. Then we got a couple of capacitors and inductors here. Everything looks really good. And underneath this heat sink here, we have the fan as well as the CPU. So if we look at the back here, we can see that this one here is used to cool the CPU. So let's get that one out, because I didn't hear or see this one spinning as I was using a computer. So it's a standard 5-volt little fan here. I did decide to test it on my power bench because I wanted to make sure if it was still working. So I just hooked it up with these jumper wire cables here, set my lab bench to 5 volts, and then check to see if it would run. So let me just plug in the positive lead here, And as you can see, the fan seems to be working fine. So either it's controlled via software and the laptop just wasn't enabling the fan to run. Now I also wanted to remove this heatsink here, and I hit a little bit of a snag there because there was just one screw that was really fastened and I wasn't able to unscrew it. Now that was really weird because I immediately stopped as soon as I noticed that, you know, my bit didn't bite into the screw. But you can clearly see from this picture here that the screw is damaged. And as a result, I wasn't able to remove this heatsink and take a look at the CPU, which is a bit of a shame. And you know, up until this point, every screw that I removed from this laptop was a Phillips screw, no matter what size it was. So I'm pretty sure that I wasn't using the wrong bit, but yeah, it's kind of a shame that I'm not able to show you what is underneath this heatsink. The only thing I can do right now is kind of remove this daughter board here, which holds the CPU and some memory. But yeah, I was really looking forward to seeing the actual CPU, which, you know, I cannot do right now. So that's really a shame. I'm not going to drill out this screw here. If anyone has an idea what might have happened here, feel free to leave a comment, because I was using a Phillips bit. It worked fine with all of the other screws. It was just this one that, you know, for some reason failed to open, and then it got completely messed up. Okay, but moving along, here we have the chips. This is basically the graphics controller chip. There is some video memory here as well, and here are the connectors for the daughter board. And now we can focus on the top part of the laptop, which is the LCD panel and, you know, some cabling here and the two speakers that we're going to be removing. Because as you can see, this one has also suffered quite a bit in terms of the battery leakage. So we'll start by unscrewing this bracket here that holds the speaker in place. So that's fairly easy to remove, just one screw. And with the bracket removed, we can access the speaker now. So the speaker can be removed very easily. Here we have it. And there's also this little piece of rubber here, which is probably used for, you know, sound dampening or something, so that the speaker doesn't rattle against the plastic. We have a couple of bits of plastic here that hold the various cables in place. Nothing special there. Same procedure for the other speaker. And there are various pieces of tape and plastic here that kind of route the various cables to their appropriate location. Unfortunately, some of these plastics become very brittle over time, and it becomes very easy to snap things off, so you need to be really careful with that. We also have this frame here, which is used when the laptop is shut down, or when you pull down the panel so that it goes into sleep mode. We're going to go ahead and remove that as well. And then we can just continue unscrewing whatever screws we are still finding here. And next up, it's just a matter of using that plastic spudger again to, you know, go through all of the edges here of the plastics and see if we can get this top part off. It kind of snaps off if you find the correct clips. And just go around the screen very carefully, prying it open. But then I noticed that as I was going around the entire screen, that there were basically 2 points where it was still held on with some kind of screw, and that screw was located here. So we need to find a way to kind of peel off this little thing here, and for that I'm just going to be using this set of tweezers here to gently peel off this. Not really sure what material this is, but it's kind of like a sticker, but a little bit more thick. That will reveal the 2 screws that we need to get out on one side. And then on the other side, we see the actual model number here that we can also peel off like so, very gently taking it off. And we find ourselves another screw that we can unscrew. allowing us full access to the LCD panel here. Now 4 screws are holding that LCD panel in place, but of course it is still connected with a couple of cables. For example, here we have a small flat cable here that we are going to remove. And then on the other side, we have the high voltage section for the inverter. So the 2 cables that you see coming out of the LCD panel is for the backlight, and they go into this daughter PCB here, which is actually a CCFL inverter board, or a cold cathode fluorescent lamp inverter. It's a high voltage component, so it's shielded with plastics. I couldn't get the connector off, so I just decided to pull the PCB out of the plastic housing together with the LCD panel, because I didn't want to rip out any cables here. We also have a small board here which contains a knob for changing the contrast of the LCD display. So yeah, we have the LCD cable here at the bottom, which goes into the motherboard. We have the contrast knob and also the power for the inverter board. Now to get that plastic cover off, there are 2 masks here that we need to remove that hide a couple of screws. And these are the screws that actually hold the plastic top cover where the LCD was housed onto the metal hinges that allow you to tilt the LCD. So we're going to be carefully removing these masks here. I'm just using a pair of tweezers here, just not to damage them or try to limit the damage, because obviously this is not the most ideal design. It's glued in there, so we need to get in there and then just tear it off so that we can get access to the screws. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the housing, because also there we have 2 screws. And then it's just a matter of unscrewing those 4 screws, and then we should be able to get that top cover off relatively easily. Now I have to say, at this point I was a bit focused too much on these hinges here. I was trying to figure out how I could get these removed from the plastic housing, and I just didn't see a way to do so. But you have to take a couple of things step by step in a certain order. So the first task at hand was to actually remove the plastic cover first, and then see how we would deal with the actual hinges. And it turns out removing that top cover is relatively easy, providing of course you have freed up all the cables here that are kind of stuck here onto this plastic housing. Because we have removed the 4 screws on the metal hinges, we just need to pop the plastic thing out, and then it just completely detaches. As you can see, it's pretty dirty, so we'll need to do some cleaning. And now we can look at the actual hinges and see how we can get these out. And it actually took me a while to figure out how I could remove those hinges from the plastic frame here, because it wasn't very obvious at first. You need to kind of pull them out at a specific angle, otherwise they just wouldn't come out. So the idea is that you just remove them a bit, slide them over, and then turn them into an angle so that you can get them out with relative ease. So this also provides us a way to get these cables out so that we're left with nothing but plastics, because obviously we want to clean them. Let me show it again. So we slide it on out, we pull it out on a bit of an angle, and then it should just fall right out. And to put it back in, we just do the same thing but in reverse. Now the hinge on the other side is a bit different. There's also this piece of plastic here that we need to get out first. It's a big chunk of plastic which is used to cover not only the hinge but also provides a path for these cables here. The plastic is already a bit broken. As I said before, it is very brittle, and chances are that you are going to break this if you try to remove it. I'm going to do the best I can. So luckily I was able to get it out in one piece. It was a bit cracked at a certain point, but it didn't break off completely. And with that plastic out of the way, we can also remove this cable here and then see if we can get this hinge out of the way. It's a different shape, so it's not the same as the one on the right, but yeah, twisting it at a certain angle gets it out. As you can see, it's pretty rusty, so we're going to be tackling that as well. But yeah, I'm glad we got these hinges out of the way. It was one of the most challenging things in the disassembly of this laptop. I'm going to be cleaning them. And, you know, like I said, we have one piece of plastic here, but there are still a couple of, you know, metallic clips here that I want to remove, because this thing definitely needs a good clean. I mean, just look at these mouse buttons, how gross these are. So yeah, I'm just going to use these set of tweezers here to get all of these clips from the plastic. And so yes, there we have it. Our Toshiba Satelitte laptop completely disassembled. Model 4000 CDS. And man, that's a lot of parts right here. I mean, some were more easy to remove than others. Some of them have survived disassembly while others did not, or not completely. Now the goal now is to put everything back together again, and hopefully things will still work. I hope you found this video somewhat interesting. I know I did. I learned quite a lot. Too bad for that broken screw on the CPU board. I really wanted to open up that one as well. It was a Phillips screw for sure, so I'm not really sure what went wrong there. If somebody else already went in there before me, or if I should have used the bigger or smaller bit, I have no idea. But other than that, no major catastrophes occurred, and we're gonna put this thing back together again and have a play with it. So in the meantime, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for the next one, where we will do some cleaning, where we will do some assembly again, and hopefully get it up and running again. If you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.